Today I'm joined by Betsy Kauffman. Betsy is an executive coach and organizational strategist who helps leaders and teams cut through ambiguity, strengthen alignment, and execute well, especially in the middle of change. Her work focuses on practical leadership habits that reduce silos, build trust across teams, and create a steady execution rhythm without burning people out. In this conversation, we'll dig into what new and mid level managers, as well as senior leaders, can do when priorities are unclear, when everything feels urgent, and what good communication looks like in order to reach real alignment. Plus, a few additional topics that you don't want to miss. Without further ado, let's welcome Betsy to the Manager Track podcast. Betsy, it's great to have you on the Manager Track podcast.
Hi, Ramona. Thanks for having me. I'm super excited to be here to talk with you today.
So you have decades of experience in the C-suite yourself, but also supporting a lot of teams and C-level executives in their role. And one of the things that I found really interesting that I wanted to talk to you about is creating alignment throughout the organization. And it's, I often feel like, well, this can't be rocket science. This is not so hard. And yet we often see how the problems we're dealing with at work stem from misalignment in the first place. Can you tell us a little bit more about the issues and the problems that you're noticing and the root causes that we could prevent?
So it's funny, I came up for the ranks, individual contributor, then became a manager. And as I was working my way up through the ranks, I would often find that leaders were not aligned in what they were asking team members to do. And so I started to come in and work with teams. And have them become high performing and getting them all on the same page. And then leaders started bringing me into their mix to say, hey, can you come help us? What's going on here? And so what I typically find is when I'm brought in, we usually have a group of leaders from different parts of the business, or maybe even the same part of the business, that just don't actually learn how to communicate well with each other, and are not aligned and having really tough, honest conversations about what are the things that we should be focused on as either a company or as a department. And when we don't have that kind of alignment, then all the folks at the team level and the individual contributor level are, of course, are going to be struggling because we're getting directions from possibly different leaders. And that's where we've been able to come in and just get some clarity, but not only get clarity across the leaders, but then how do you actually communicate that down line so that it can execute on whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish within your teams or your company.
So, on that note, what are some best practices or some things that you think leaders across the different levels can pay attention to, can do to ensure that if the leadership team is aligned, that then, or assuming it is, that then it can trickle down into the different levels of the
Yeah.
organization?
Yeah. So probably the most common thing that we see is that it doesn't trickle down, right? That's like the biggest problem that we have because we see that they get into a room, they might all agree, but then there's never ever a plan at the end of the day to say, okay, now what do we do with this? How do we make sure that everybody gets rowing in the same direction? So the first thing would be make sure you have a communication plan and that is consistent with whoever is communicating across the organization and into the downlines. The other thing is check in frequently with all your different teams, right? So if it's a weekly cadence or a monthly cadence, but whatever you've decided, make sure that your teams are still like understand exactly what it is that we're supposed to be doing. We're on the same page and have some of that free flowing feedback up and down the chain. So if there is confusion or there isn't clarity, leaders need to make sure they're aware of that, right? Because a lot of times they'll get into a room, they'll talk about it, maybe they'll somewhat communicate, and then they expect everybody to execute. They never ask the questions. Do they have what they need? Are they being blocked? Are there decisions that they need? Like, what can I do to unstick you? And so I think there's always that kind of like first cascading the conversation and the communication downwards, but then allowing feedback to come back to allow them to say, okay, how do we help you and how do we ensure you have what you need to get whatever's done needs to get done?
I'm going to try to get even more granular with this.
Okay.
When you said make sure you have a communication plan, let's say the organization, maybe it's a team or if the company with 200, 300 employees, and they
Mhm.
decide they want to incorporate AI or test out an experiment with some AI technology. They are going to make a plan and have a strategy in place on how they're going to do this. When you said have a communication plan in place, what would that entail in that
Yeah.
specific scenario?
Yeah. So first it's setting out the large vision. This is what we're trying to accomplish, making sure that you have a forum or a very variety of forums for that team or for those team members to hear it, to understand it. Then ensure that you have a really good forum or some sort of a feedback loop. So whether it be through either um, like a team community chat or some sort of other format there that you can communicate it backwards so they can ask questions. So you want to make sure, okay, this is the plan. This is how we're going to do it. This is the frequency that we're going to do it. And here's who's responsible and accountable to execute on that plan. So it's really making sure that it's the who, the what, the where, the when has been addressed, and that you're holding whoever is accountable for that accountable to execute upon that. So hopefully that as long as there's something that they say, okay, this is exactly what we're going to do, and we do it, that's where we often find that companies are better and are able to communicate.
Okay. And you just spoke about the execution. And one of the things that you talk about is having an execution rhythm.
Mhm.
I'm in our work, we're all about systems and making sure that you have a leadership and an operating system in place, one that you keep iterating that allows you to grow and scale your leadership responsibilities. So I was really curious to hear more about the quarterly execution rhythm that you talk about and how maybe even how that ties into the example we just addressed with
Yeah.
let's say AI and then a communication plan that goes along with that.
Yeah. So when we start to put in a quarterly execution rhythm, we really want to make sure that every quarter we're getting the key leaders together. We spend time, we do some time, spend some time doing some leadership development, honestly, and some team development. But then we sit down, we talk about what is the strategy for the year. What are the 1 to 3, no more than 3 to 4 initiatives or priorities that we want to accomplish as a company across the board. So that's kind of where we start with the execution rhythm. And then we talk about now how do we break that down into bite-sized quarterly pieces. So we do an annual plan, we do a quarterly plan, and then with that quarterly plan, we really make sure that the team has the understanding and again, the communication and the cascading down as to what we're trying to accomplish. So that's where we sometimes see, we might have the best strategy in the world and we might put in place a nice rhythm within the team. But if we haven't communicated it downward, it doesn't matter because you probably won't achieve it because you're basically putting it on the shoulders of the leaders as opposed to actually communicating it downward into the teams and into the different individual contributors and into the team managers. So when we have the annual plan, we have the quarterly plan, and then we keep meeting every quarter, right, as a leadership team. And so, and really holding that group accountable and the company accountable to say, all right, we put this plan in place. Did we achieve what we said we were going to? Why or why not? How do we do something better? Now, what do we want to do for the next quarter? So it becomes a very prescriptive type of rhythm in that we know we're going to put together a plan, we're going to execute upon it, and we're going to come back and retrospect on it, and then we're going to continue to put another plan in place each quarter. So that's really the rhythm that we're looking for. And then the expectation is that leaders come together every month, if not every week, to hold each other accountable. Are we executing like we said we are going to, or are we not? So really you want, and it just kind of sounds funny, but you want this like execution rhythm to be boring. Like you want it to be very predictable. I'm like, okay, we have another quarterly. This is the expectation. We're going to set out our initiatives. We're going to say our outcomes. We're going to execute upon it. And then if we don't, we're going to say why or why not. And we really want to make sure that folks just get into that kind of predictable, but just pattern of working together. And that way our teams understand, okay, every quarter, we're probably going to be changing a little bit about what is our focus, or we may not. We might actually say, hey, we're going to do something that's going to last us 3 quarters. Let's make sure we do it well. And we're providing the tools for everybody that they need to actually accomplish what we're looking for.
So you mentioned just now there that there's there only have a few priorities,
Yeah.
not 5, 6, 7.
Yeah.
And this again is something seems very common sense, but it's not common practice because it's hard to do to actually hone in on a set of key priorities. And every time I talk to a leader about what is it that you want to achieve and what is it that you actually do, they're often able to tell me their priorities in terms of goals.
Yeah.
And yet, when we look at how they're spending their time, that is not reflected in their calendar because so
Right.
many other things show up. what would you recommend for someone who finds himself in this situation? They're very clear on those main strategies, but then day to day just does not look like that.
Yeah. So first thing would be why. What do you have on your plate that is distracting you? Are there things? Are we firefighting or are we actually doing fire prevention? Which usually we're firefighting. Do we have the right people in place in order to support us to achieve those goals? When you look at your calendar, I don't know about you, but I color code a lot of things on my calendar, and so you might even just going back and be like, okay, I this was stuff that was related to the goals and to the initiatives and to where we're trying to go versus these are meetings that were potentially could have been handled differently or were not at all related to, or I was firefighting or whatever. And then really kind of doing a step back to be like, okay, why do I spend most of my day doing things that are not related to the goals or to the initiatives? And I think if you kind of start to look at that, and are there other opportunities? Can I delegate this to another team member? Can I pull in other folks to help me? Like, how do I get things off my plate so that I can focus on the most high priority things for the company or for my team or department, depending on where you're at within the organization?
And so this is like the trick question then. Someone says, um, that all sounds good. And
Yeah.
I can delegate all of those things, but then a senior leader comes along and says, drop everything, we got to solve this client issue, or drop everything, we got to put this feature out because our prospects needs it and they're not going to sign the deal unless we develop this feature. And so
Right.
there goes the plan, there goes the idea with the priorities. In situations like this, really in the trenches, what are your suggestions for leaders and managers caught in
Yeah.
that situation?
Yeah, so it really is about for me, when I'm coaching and working with leaders that are in the trenches, and they're getting things dropped in their lap and like, stop everything. This is now high priority. It's about taking a moment and you're not arguing with your leader, but you're just clarifying. Okay, I just want to make sure that I'm supposed to stop whatever I had on my plate initially, and that we're going to pick this up as a new priority. And the impact that we to do that will be that this will not move forward, or we may not complete this customer request, or we may not miss developing this feature or whatever it is. And get that clarity and have them understand the impact of what it is to stop something and to pick something else up new, because as you know, by doing that, that usually tends to have a repercussion down the line. And as long as you have that clarity and you have that conversation, it's almost a negotiation to say, yes, we are going to do that. Yes, we go in that direction. And then they also take ownership of sending you in a new direction, possibly. Or they may say, oh, that's a good point. I never thought about that. How long is it going to take for you to finish this other thing? How long is it going to, if we were to put this as a higher priority, what is that going to do here? So, it becomes a really good negotiation conversation. And I feel like those are great skills as a frontline leader, first time leader, to learn how to set expectations and also how to negotiate, and just clarify decisions and outcomes.
Which is actually I think, a really good point because it is a skill to develop to not only, have the knowledge that you understand where the company is going and what those priorities are on the business level or the department level, but then also to be able to take a request that's coming in and maybe you negotiate the deadline, maybe you negotiate the scope of it, but maybe you're also asking, wait a second, is this what we're trying to achieve with that request? Is this
Right.
really the only way to do that? Or would there
Right.
be other ways that we can achieve whatever we're looking for over here that the senior leader may not be aware of because they are
Yeah.
not as close to the problem as we might be? And
That's like a really good point because it's being able to ask that leader, like, what is the outcome that you hope to achieve? And if they cannot answer that, that might be the conversation that needs to continue, right? Because sometimes leaders will come in and tell you exactly how to do it. But to your point, we may not know why, right? They've already figured it out in their head. But again, as if you can figure out like what is the outcome, to your point, we might be able to have a better way of going about it than exactly how it's been created, possibly in a senior leader's head. And you might actually get more creative when you take that to your teams to say, okay, guys, we got to do this. Here's the outcome that we're hoping to achieve. And we also have this other priority. What recommendations do you have? And as a leader, you're helping to one, put some of that accountability and ownership into your team's laps, as well as then helping you to go back to your leader, say, okay, there might be a different way that we can do that. Now that we understand what you're trying to accomplish, we can do both. And here's the timelines and the expectations. So I think you've got some power there when you can really not only pause them and say, okay, tell me exactly what is the goal or the outcome, and then how do we actually achieve both, if it's possible or not, and have those really great conversations with your senior leaders.
Yeah, and I think that is when oftentimes leaders say we need our newer managers or even our ICs and our high performers to think more broadly about the business and to
Yeah,
think critically about the direction they're taking or their priorities. I think a lot of it is reflected, or that skill can be demonstrated in exactly those conversations that we
mm,
have, maybe sort of ad hoc or in our one-on-ones.
yeah, yeah, for sure.
One aspect of misalignment or recurring sort of realignment and changes of priorities is not just the loss in efficiency that can happen, but also the mental and emotional load that we put on the team.
Yeah,
And I think back at a conversation with a client I had a few years ago who said, I don't remember a single quarter where we didn't have a reorg in their startup.
yeah,
And
right, right.
it you could just tell, like, gosh, they felt so drained. It was like, "Yet another reorg, you gotta be kidding me." And it
Yeah,
became a bit of a joke to them too, but it was not in a funny way, but just like, you can't believe this organization, what is going on?" And
right.
they started to have, a huge retention problem because people were just like, "I'm out of here. I'm wasting my time constantly rethinking and redoing everything." So there is a fine line between like we got to keep up with the changes of the market, we got to keep realigning and make sure that we adapt, but then also what's the cost, right, on the team when priorities are unclear or priorities change all the time, and we may have these beautiful communication plans and then the execution looks very different because we adapt too much. Uh, what is your experience working sort of in the trenches with teams when it comes to the human aspect? Uh,
Yeah, I mean, I've seen this all the time. I actually was just speaking to a leader not too long ago. It's like I think I've had 4 managers in the past year, which is crazy. That kind of goes back to your, reorging. And when we have that, um, as you know, there is a lot of fatigue. People get really frustrated. They don't believe in what we're doing. There is not clarity in what it is that we're hoping everybody will accomplish within the organization. I mean, I've lived in that world. I'm like, okay, now what's the flavor this month? And what are we doing, next month and all those things. And so people actually stop, wanting to be a part of this change and a part of the bigger picture because they're just like waiting for the next thing to come down the pike. And so that's where leaders need to be very cognizant of like, okay, we said we want to do this. Now we're changing course or we're realigning or we're reorging or we're doing this or we're doing that. And really that then starts to get your company kind of just almost like spinning in 7 different directions. And so if you can stay focused and keep everybody on the same page and try to get them rowing in the same direction. I use that term a lot, but it's true, right? We want everybody kind of knowing what's happening. You're going to be able to get your outcomes a lot faster. But if you're constantly like shifting priorities and shifting where people are reporting to and who they're working for and are they still in this line of business or that line of business? It's just all that churn is unnecessary and it causes a lot of angst, I think, and anxiety, which isn't necessary. So as much as you can protect your teams and keep them super focused is going to help them to just stay comfortable and confident in what they're doing and not be like in this world of change fatigue and who do I report to now and what are we trying to accomplish now and are we going in a different direction. And some people thrive on that, especially when you see a lot of change of leadership at the senior level. Some when they come in, they want to make a mark on their, all right, I'm going to come in and I'm going to reorg, but like really think about, is that the right thing? If it's not broken, do we need to reorg immediately or can we actually kind of learn the organization, figure out better ways to work together without causing a lot of churn internally?
when a team or someone who might be listening to this notices, no, we're actually already kind of down that path where we
Hmm.
feel tired of all the change and shifting priorities or the lack of clarity. One-on-ones are a good way to surface some of this and support it too. But yeah, maybe around one-on-ones and beyond, what are your suggestions for someone who's dealing with this right now?
Yeah, I think a lot of times I've been coaching a leader recently and he keeps asking, what can I do to support you? And I think that's a really tough question because it's a very open-ended question. Because we're like, I don't know, I don't know, maybe just keep helping me, right? I think being very specific when you're as a leader with a one-on-one, what decisions do you need for me? what is unclear that you're working on? Is there something that I can clarify for you? What is the top three things that are on your plate that you're focused on from a priority standpoint? So very specifically asking them and seeing if they understand what it is that we're looking for them to do. If they don't, those should be cleared. Like those should actually be like signals for you as a leader, like, okay, time out. I need to really make sure this person or my team has what they need to be supported. Do I need to clear roadblocks, make decisions, give them refocus on priorities, help to understand, where we're having confusion, we don't understand what we're trying to accomplish. So when you hear that and actually act on it, it's going to be much your team is one going to respect you, and I think you're going to see a lot better results because of your being engaged and interested in what's going on a one-on-one as well as with the team as a whole.
Do you have a favorite question other than the one that would replace how can I better support you?
Uh, There's a couple ones, like, what is one thing that we should stop doing? Right? We never ask that because we're always asking, like, what are we gonna work on next? But, like, what is one thing I can take off your plate? Or what is one thing that we need to stop doing that's gonna help you to accomplish ABC, XYZ, whatever it is that we're working on. That one is I use that one a lot with leaders too, when I'm working with senior leaders, like, okay, great, you have all these things. Now, what are you going to stop working on so that you can actually accomplish these goals that you want? So I think that's a good one. And then what decisions do you need from me, or where are you blocked? How can I unblock you? How can I make sure that you have everything that you need in order to do your job?
I think there's so much power in having just a it's like the tiny book of questions, but
Yeah, right. Yeah.
makes such a difference in leadership when whether we default to sort of the simple question similar to, "Do you have any feedback for me?"
Yeah.
It not much is gonna come with that, and then, like, "No, everything's great," and then we walk away and we think like, "A, I don't get enough feedback," but also, maybe everything is actually great. Both of those assumptions are actually not true. They're the result of the way the question was asked.
Yeah.
There's definitely feedback.
Yeah.
There's always something that we could share. Um, and there's also, of course, there's also true that a lot of things are going well, but we have to ask the right question. And the tiny book of questions, like the
Right.
one you said, like, what do you need to stop doing? What do we need to stop doing? It's
Right.
a great question to create alignment. I
Yeah.
also find, like, going back to the alignment, I find that question, and it sounds a bit woo-woo, but it leads to really good conversations. The question of what do you believe the purpose of your role is?
That's a great one.
So in
Yes.
this season, in this quarter, this year, whatever, time frame you want to put that on, because roles evolve. But that really gets people thinking, like, yeah, what's other than just executing tasks, like, why am I here? What's my role? And what I
And I
find,
think
like, asking that, I have a different answer in my head than what I typically hear most of the time.
yeah. Yeah. And I also think as long as you can create the safe space, right? Because right now I feel like we're in a really interesting world of flux and people are like, wait a minute, why is she asking me that? Like if I don't answer the question right, am I gonna still have a job if I don't know what my role is? So I think it's also building that relationship with that person one on one, with your great questions, but also making sure like they have comfort in answering questions from you and giving feedback. They may not feel comfortable giving, as a leader, giving you feedback, right? Or you as a leader maybe not be comfortable giving them feedback. And so I think back to your point of how can we ask really good, like, in that last meeting, do you have any feedback for me, right? So very specific, like what went well, what didn't go well. And then listening, and like how you respond is really critical too as a leader. So I think, as you're in those one-on-ones, if they do have feedback for you, do you actually receive it well, and do you take the feedback, and do you thank them for the feedback? Those are all tricks and tips, I think, for first-time leaders on how to become a better leader and how to support your one-on-ones.
Mm. Yeah, and I'd probably say not just great tips for first-time leaders, but probably not
Every
just for first-time leaders. In fact, especially when it comes to feedback, more senior leaders have often a harder time, not a harder time with the feedback, but it's harder for them to get feedback,
Yes.
and then
Yes.
also to do the follow-up, just because of the intensity of the job.
Right. Right. Yeah, they have a lot on their plate, like, especially the middle leaders, like middle managers. I mean, if you think about it, they've got three direct reports reporting into them. Maybe they've even got like leaders and then direct reports. They've got their peers, they've got their senior leaders. So they've got everybody pushing on them. And it is hard to ask for feedback and to get everything and to continue to keep all the balls in the air. But I do think, one of the things that we ask in our 360 survey is, on a scale of 1 to 10, how is this person in giving or getting feedback. And more often than not, I hear like, oh, I don't know. They don't usually ask me for feedback. But I'm sure if they did, they'd be open to it. Right. So I think there is a perception that most people are open to feedback, but they don't usually take the time to stop and ask for it. To say, hey, tell me how I did in that meeting, or tell me, what do you need me to stop? What do you need me to do to help you to support you in your role? That type of thing. So I think it is kind of a key skill that we often give feedback as middle leaders, but we don't actually ask for feedback back to us and getting it.
Yeah. Your 360 process, another piece that I wanted to touch on, because when we use 360s in coaching engagements or with teams or organizations who often incorporate such a process of getting feedback from multiple people sort of around a person or a leader, that happens as part of their performance review and really fuels the conversations and the insights that someone personally gets, but also ideally then their manager gets to support their growth.
Right.
And what, behind the scenes, for
Yeah.
you, seeing a lot of 360 feedback coming back and looking at this, what are some of the common blind spots that you identify and say, like, yep, okay, this keeps coming up, or nowadays keeps coming up even more than it used to?
Right. So our 360s maybe a tad bit different than some or most. So we actually do an interview-based 360, and we go in and we interview every single person that person has identified. So it's usually 10 or 11 of their people in their hemisphere. I always call it their hemisphere. So one, it allows us to go a little bit deeper. So not just answering, like, again, if you've been with somebody in a meeting and it didn't go well, and then you have a 360 and I'm gonna give 'em a 5. That was terrible, right? So we try not to be that emotional reaction survey. We actually have the interviews, we ask questions, we kind of watch, we do them virtually, we watch the Zooms to figure out, like, okay, they kind of made a weird face there, or they didn't want to say something, and we try to dive a little bit deeper. But um, a lot of what I'm seeing is either it's an executive presence, so something like they just are not ready to move into the next level because they're missing executive presence. Um, a lot of it is being confident in who they are and being able to make tough decisions, and delegation. Like those are kind of some of the common themes. As you get up within the ranks, it's interesting because we will interview your peers, we'll interview your direct reports, we'll interview your leaders, and so as you get up in the ranks, we often find that your peers are the ones that maybe have a harder time working with you, right? As opposed to when you're, potentially newer in your role as a leader, it might be something a little bit different. So as I watch these kind of progressions of leaders, it depends, like, how are you supporting all the different people that you work with? And so we try to really make sure, okay, like, hey, your direct reports love you, you're doing a fantastic job, your clients love you, you're doing a fantastic job, but your senior leaders want to see more of you, right? They want to see the executive presence, they want to see the confidence, they want to see decision making and delegation. And it's time for you to kind of up your game and up your leadership skills to be able to jump to that next level. So, those are a lot of the common themes that we get pulled in for. So, come in, help coach us, do some 360s. Those are usually what we're hearing why. And then there usually might be something else, one or two other things that they're looking for.
What do you think it is that working with peers is trickier at a higher level?
Um, I think, as a leader, you need to be able to reach across the aisle, right? And you need to be able to build that relationship too. That relationship actually might be the most important relationship than your downlines. And I know people might be like, "No, I don't agree with that." However, in order to be able to get things done and get things accomplished, it's how do we, is that your team that you kind of work with first as opposed to your downlines? And I think that's where people often forget. Like there's the whole Patrick Lencioni first team thing can also go down in within the organization. So when you can look across and reach across and figure out, like, how do we all come together? you're going to have greater success than trying to be working against your peers. And that friction, it's interesting because it's almost like we become very competitive. I've seen a lot of organizations like, oh, wait, we're all vying for the same potential opportunities. It's not true though, because if we can accomplish a goal together, we're going to be way more successful than us kind of doing our own thing and trying to, I hate to say it, but like kind of climb over each other as we go up the ladder, as we go up the chain within a company.
What's your go-to move? And you walk into a client and you realize like, oh, that that competition is present, and not in a good way, not like the positive kind of competition, but the one where it creates silos. Um, what's your approach there?
Um, I actually, it's funny because I will show the Patrick Lencioni video. He's got a really quick little video that's like, who's your first team? And kind of ask like I ask that question first, like who's your first team? And 9 times out of 10, oh, it's my downline, right? It's whoever reports into me, it's my downline. And then the video really talks about no, it's actually the people that are your peers in the room around you. In order to build that strong foundation, you're going to be able to be much more successful. So I first just I put it out there and I just make it known. And maybe that's a little bit jarring for people, right? But I think sometimes you just have to have very open, honest conversations and be like, "Hey, this is what we're seeing. This is what we're hearing," and then start to have that conversation. Do you feel that this is your first team? And I kind of gauge like how trustful and transparent are these folks in the room, and if they're like, "Oh yeah, no," the ones that say no, then I know that we've got some transparency and there's some areas to work with. The ones that all agree with me, I'm like, okay, that's not really true, right? And then we start to put in place, okay, what does it mean to actually make these people your first people that you work with? Make this is the actual more important team that you're working with as opposed to your downlines. Then we do work around that. So when I was talking about kind of our execution rhythm and the development work we do, sometimes we'll do work on getting that team stronger as throughout the year in each of our quarterly sessions and getting them to learn how to work better together as opposed to getting their downlines stronger.
Mm-hmm.
It all
Yeah,
kind of comes
yeah.
full circle. I don't want to say 360, but it all kinds of comes full circle, right? That then you can get the alignment, then you can get the conversations, then you can communicate the plan. So like there's a whole kind of process to it as long as you can build that high performance.
Mhm. Well, yeah, and then you have throughout the different departments or sub teams, you then have actual cohesion because the leadership team sends a cohesive message to everyone else.
Yeah. Yeah. And then if there are things happening in somebody else's area and that leader's maybe not aware of it, you're comfortable like surfacing it up and saying, we've been struggling with your folks and your team. What can we do to support you? How do we come together? How do we do the same thing? A lot of times they're having cross collaboration anyway, and we don't even know it. So
Mhm.
it's important to have that conversation or have those open lines of communication.
Right. You mentioned that one of the blind spots you recognize is executive presence.
Yeah.
And we do a lot of work around executive presence and break it down into four different pillars. But I'm always curious of like what is your definition of executive presence, and maybe more importantly, how do you see executive presence actually get in the way of someone getting promoted?
Yeah. It's funny. For me, executive presence is one of those things that I think's really interesting, right? Because it's a perception. Right? It's somebody's perception of you, and can you sit in a room and hold court, and have good conversations and work with leaders and work with executives, and talk to them in a calm, rational, data-driven, factual manner. You hear them, you know how to bottom line. It's all these little pieces and things. But again, at the end of the day, I think it does come down to perception. So one of the examples is I was brought in to coach this one leader who I've actually been working with now for over 5 years because he and I started working together. I guess it's six right before COVID started. We actually, our engagement was like, oh, now we're all going home. Now what are we doing? And I was brought in to coach him because his leader felt like he did not have the executive presence that he was looking for him to move to the next level. And then when we did the 360, all his direct reports, all of his customers, all of his everybody that kind of worked, all of his peers, didn't said that was not a problem. It was only the leader's problem that this person was missing executive presence. So for me, it's kind of a tough one because yes, I think there's some common traits and characteristics that you're looking for, but then it also comes down to the perception of the people that are around you, that are your leaders, that are hoping to say, okay, yes, this person is ready to sit at the boardroom or sit in the next level like leader meeting. So I know that's probably people are like, no, 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 I want specifics, but it is. I mean, it's good communications, it's understanding what's going on in the room, it's asking great questions, it's being able to bottom line, it's having, it's controlling your emotions and having emotional intelligence. But it's also making sure that people see you as a leader and as a potential executive that can continue to move up in the organization.
Yeah, and I think you make a good point. Sometimes it's not everyone's perception of you in terms of those particular skills, right? Sometimes, even when I debrief a 360 with a client and we say there are things in the 360, there are actual skill gaps that come up or behavioral changes that are required for you to be more effective in your role.
Right.
But then there are also things that you're actually already doing the right thing. You're already doing that well, but people either misinterpret it, they don't understand your intention behind it, or they don't see it. And
Correct.
so it could be that you're actually good with thinking critically or being quick on your feet or pushing back when needed. But when it comes to your one senior leader, that person may be a little intimidating. And so you feel like they're too assertive or in their presence, it might not be appropriate to push back
Right.
enough. And then it's exactly that leader that says, like, yeah, no, they don't push
Yeah.
back. Hmm.
Right. Right. It's a perception. So again, being able to get that feedback like in the 360s is helpful because then you're like, oh, this is how I'm perceived. Because that's what 360s are. It's how you're perceived. Right. And so if you're perceived that you're lacking executive presence, okay, I might, if I ask my peers, they may think that I have all the executive presence in the world, but if my leaders perceive that I don't, I got to figure out how to change that gap, that perception gap, or it might be a true gap. It might be a real gap to your point, but it is a perception thing, and that's, I mean, that's the reality of companies and organizations and leaders and all the dynamics. Is how do you show up and how do you bring all the skills that you need to continue to move up in your career?
Yeah, exactly. Betsy, thank you so much for coming on the Mentor Track podcast. I always think it's so insightful to hear other people, like come in and talk about what it actually looks like behind the scenes of working with teams and with leaders. It's often the work that we don't see. It happens behind closed doors. It happens in private um, rooms, sometimes over Zoom from someone's home, and we may not recognize how a leader gets coached on the back end, how a team does work during their offsites that is related to and really focused on their interpersonal dynamics. And so we may
Yeah.
be an employee in an organization who just think it all comes somewhat natural, and some people are more talented than others, and we don't see how much work goes into it. So I hope that in addition to everything else that you shared that was very insightful, that our audience also picks up that, oh, there's a lot that happens, it's a lot of coaching that happens that we may not be exposed to.
Most executives either have a coach or have been coached, and there is a lot of work that goes into it, right? And so they are all humans. They've all worked their way up, and they're still trying to figure it out too. So, I mean, I'm going to be really honest with you. A lot of times, I get emails and texts. I'm like, I'm trying to get this email right. I'm trying to get this conversation right, and they're very senior leaders, and so they run things by me or the strategy document or things like that. So the same practice that individual contributors and first time managers and even middle managers, your senior leaders are still trying to figure it out and they're still trying to get it right, and they're human, and sometimes they do amazingly well, and sometimes they will pause and be like, I don't know that I did the right thing in that meeting, and like, you were in that meeting, did you have any feedback for me? And so they're also trying to be a better leader and figure that out as well.
Mhm. I think the easiest and fastest way to get stuck in a career is to stop asking yourself those questions, to stop being exposed to learning opportunities and to reflect and to really realize, like, nah, I'm still learning this too. I'm trying to do better. I'm trying to present better, lead better, all of that. And when we think like, no, no, I got this. I got 10 years, 20 years of experience. I don't need to invest in it anymore. That's usually who
Right.
we see like flatten out and
Yeah.
others passing on.
Absolutely. There's
Mhm.
always opportunity to learn something new and learn something more. And I think as long as you continue to stay curious and, I mean, I learned stuff from all of my, brand new folks that I work with that are just out of college and are just starting their careers. Like, there's so much stuff that you can learn from each other. And I think as long as you approach it that way, as you move up in your career, you'll be successful, and you never know, you might, you'll end up getting paired with other people and just really having great relationships. It's funny, I'm coaching this one group right now, and one of their initiatives is to bring more AI into their organization, into their department. And so we've got this really awesome young, like super excited guy to bring the AI, and then we've got probably the oldest leader in the group, and we've paired them. And they are having a blast learning from each other and pushing each other. And, one of them sees it as a mentor and one of them sees it as a mentee, but then there's also like a technology and learning curve on the other side of it. And so, like, they're having a very awesome just relationship, learning how to, okay, as somebody who loves AI, how do I actually help the folks that are maybe a little bit in it that aren't as accustomed to it and love technology as much as I do? And then how do I slow down some of these folks to make sure that we're bringing in the right tooling and that we're doing the right thing? Because I've got, the kind of the experience of the company. So it's fun to do that kind of pairing as well. If you aren't as a leader, if you're kind of trying to figure out how to mix up your group a bit, find some different personalities and different levels of leadership and different age groups, and you might really be surprised as to what comes out of it, because of the dynamics of the workforce are becoming very different and multi-generational, as we continue to have more people staying in the workforce longer.
Beautiful. Yeah, and very important point. Thank you, Betsy, for being on the Manager Track podcast. We will link both to the video that you mentioned by Patrick Lencioni in the show notes. We will also link to your bio.
Great.
We will also link to your LinkedIn profile and your website too for people who want to learn more about your work.
Thanks, Romana. Thanks for having me. Great show. Appreciate it.
If you enjoyed this episode, then check out 2 other awesome resources to help you become a leader people love to work with. This includes a free masterclass on how to successfully lead as a new manager. Check it out at arcova.org/masterclass. The second resource is my best-selling book, The Confident and Competent New Manager: How to Quickly Rise to Success in Your First Leadership Role. Check it out at arcova.org/books, or head on over to Amazon and grab your copy there. You can find all those links in the show notes down below.